Hello and welcome to another episode of the Practical Permaculture Podcast. As you can hear, I've lost my voice a little bit this week, so I'm going to keep this intro super short and sweet. This week I am chatting to Alysse. She runs a business called Dreams of Green. You might have seen her on YouTube. She also has a course called The Ultimate Food Forest, which I'm currently enrolled in. I've started module 1 and it's really great. I'll put some links if anybody wants to have a look at it and see what it's all about. This isn't sponsored by her or anything like that. I just think it's a really cool program that she's offering and it's really well suited to my subtropical climate. We'll have a quick word from this season's sponsor, mywaterscore.com.au, and then we'll jump right into the episode. I hope you enjoy this one, guys. Our gardens and bodies are made up of water, but did you know what is in yours? If you're like me, you're probably thinking that it's time to check the tank. And on top of that, there's modern contamination of PFAS, chlorine, and other chemicals that are linked to real health impacts. Aussie-based mywaterscore.com.au has made it possible to get real lab results from NATA certified labs straight from your mailbox. Whether you're on tank, bore, or mains, it's a simple mail to lab kit that gives you clear results for bacteria, PFAS, heavy metals, and more. It's all explained in plain English. Use the code PRACTICAL to get a discount off your first test at mywaterscore.com.au. Welcome to the Practical Permaculture Podcast, your weekly dose of gardening, intentional living, and all things permaculture, served with a side of fun and plenty of great conversations. I'm your host, Alysse, and together we'll dig into practical tips, chat with experts, and explore ways to cultivate a more abundant, sustainable life. Let's get growing. Hello, Alysse.
Hi, Alysse. How are you?
Good. We were just having a giggle because we were having a bit of technical difficulty before we jumped on here. Well, we made it.
It's good to finally connect.
I know. Excellent. So, for everybody listening, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your context?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Alysse, and we are actually in the biodome at Daly's Nursery in Kyogle because I work here now. But basically, I moved to Kyogle in the Northern Rivers of Australia and moved here about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So my partner and I were we just had a suburban block, but we really wanted land. And we were actually looking for a rainforest block. And we ended up buying 10 acres of bare, compacted former cow pasture with one camphor laurel, which is well known as kind of a massive weed tree here. And that was about all we had to deal with. A few trees up the driveway, but that was it. So when we moved here as well, we didn't know anyone, and then COVID hit. And so coinciding with COVID, we had kind of, it was the tail end. I don't know if you remember, Alysse, the shocking drought we had. It was the worst drought in recorded history, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so when we moved onto our block, not only did we not have rainforest, but also everything was just brown, dead, even covered in smoke. When we first looked at the house from nearby bushfires, we had the shocking bushfires. So it really was the complete opposite to what we were looking for. And so what we set about doing is I spent a small fortune, as you do, on kind of veggies and chickens and irrigation. And I was all about, okay, we need to, become self-sufficient as soon as possible. And my partner and I had been binge watching River Cottage, Australia. Yeah. And so we're like, we need to get this massive veggie patch. But then it didn't rain for several months. Our creek was dry, the dam was dry, and we had these howling winds, dry spring on record. So everything dried out. Everything was pretty much dead. And I remember really clearly, like it was I think a 46-degree day, and I'm in the bottom of this desolate, dry paddock with no shade whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And like I was really distraught. I thought we have made the biggest mistake. Mm-hmm. And so I walked across the road. We've got access to a little creek, which was also fairly dry, just a series of puddles. And I stood under this massive black bean tree, which is a native Australian rainforest tree. And I actually took my thermometer down to the paddock. That's how I knew it was 46 degrees. And I stood under that tree and it was 10 to 15 degrees cooler. And I just went it was that defining moment where I said to my partner, that's it. Like we're planting trees. Forget the veggie patch just for now. We don't have any water to actually keep up to it. Let's get trees in the ground. So that kind of started this basically a seed obsession. And because I'd also spent a small fortune on trees, like I moved up from Victoria as well. Like I'd lived on the coast near Newcastle, but prior to that, we were just saying I actually lived on the same street as David Holmgren and Sue Kenneth. So
cool.
That was a climate I was kind of used to. So I'd ordered stuff from the Diggers Club, which is a big gardening club in Australia, but I didn't understand kind of what would work in my climate. So it was heartbreaking to have spent all this money on a veggie patch, chickens, trees. We're even bringing the chickens into the air conditioning because we had no shade for them. And so what I did is I just started observing, okay, I'm under this beautiful black bean tree. It's just thriving without any intervention from humans whatsoever. And so I started on this mission. Everywhere we went, I started observing, all right, what is thriving on the side of the road? What's actually survived through the worst drought in recorded history? And I knew usually, as you know, in Australia, the pendulum swings the other way. So I was expecting, bad floods. This was before kind of the really bad Lismore floods that we had. But I started noticing pecan trees on the side of the road. I started noticing guava trees, bush lemons, mulberries. So there are all sorts of trees on the side of the road and fruit and nut trees as well. That were absolutely thriving on neglect. So those are the trees that I started collecting seed from. And so what I did is I just set up a really basic nursery. This was kind of during the time of COVID, and just started propagating and just started planting the toughest species first, and ended up not reforesting the whole 10 acres, but put in basically a huge native timber forest, a huge food forest, and just started with kind of what worked, what grew well in the local area. And that kind of, we thought we'd start with a few trees, and that has grown into, I think, I haven't counted every one, but 4,000 or 5,000 trees planted, which is
amazing.
Saved well over like $50,000 in trees just with a little simple backyard nursery. So
wow, how cool. And that then sparked what you're doing now, because obviously you have a YouTube channel for anybody who hasn't already found you, and you're very into agroforestry and sustainability. So is that kind of where that all stemmed from? It wasn't something it was on your radar before?
Yeah, so like we had that vision, we wanted to be self-sufficient, but my partner and I are from a yachting background, so I'd spent kind of 10 years on the water, and literally the only plant that I had was this small little basil plant on the yacht, and I nurtured it for 6 months, and we were doing this big sailing race in the Mediterranean, and this big wave came over the stern of the boat and drowned my basil plant. That was the end of that. So that was like my whole, like I didn't come from, a horticulture background or any of that. So it was just that, that desire to be more self-sufficient, but realizing like the key to it was resilience. So I remember saying to my partner, look, if we were relying on this veggie patch and annuals right now, like we'd be starving because we can't keep the water up to it. So it's like those constraints, like they say in permaculture, like the problem is the solution, So I was really looking at, okay, like we have no budget right now because everything went into trying to buy a place. We had the crazy extreme temperatures. So it was just looking at, okay, well, what can we work with, with all of these constraints? And then the agroforestry rows, that kind of, it's really obvious our place on Google Maps because you can see the aerial shot of all, I've planted all these tree rows on contour because it was too steep to swale. And then the area where maybe we could have gotten a swale in, there was a huge fiber optic cable running through.
Oh, how convenient.
And of course, you know, it was up to us to try and work out where it was because it wasn't installed properly. They couldn't find it. So I'm like, we're not risking that. So again, it forced that innovation of, okay, we can't put swales in. And that's why we planted on contour. So yeah, like the first mistake I made was I wanted to replant our driveway, make it this mixed kind of native food forest. So I just did all these random tree plantings because that would look beautiful and natural. Now, one thing, I don't know if you're dealing with this, Alysse, but Soteria grass, you familiar with Soteria grass?
So I don't know if it's that. So we've only been here for a year in the Northern Rivers and we're on really heavy clay, but we have some kind of running grass that is absolutely impossible to get on top of. We've cardboarded it.
Grass that's like 2 meters tall?
Yes.
That's the one.
Oh, it's driving me nuts. I literally put a post this morning in the permaculture alumni group saying, can I solarize this without killing all the natives around it? Because I'm just so sick of this grass with these long underground runners, and it got away from us at Christmas and we have not been able to control it since.
Yeah, so it's like we coming from a suburban block, like we were used to just, you know, mowing our lawn with a push mower, and after the drought we're so happy. It's like, wow, it's so green, it's amazing. And then the grass is this big. We're like, oh, you know, this tall, it looks really great. And then it kept growing and growing. And I remember it took us 4 days to find our front boundary with 2 heavy duty brush cutters. We had no idea grass grew to over 2 meters tall.
Yeah.
But that was literally the only thing we had to work with. It was the only shelter for our trees. So what I ended up doing was, because we got frost and we had the crazy heat waves, is I cleared, when I marked out all my contour rows for planting. And then what I did is I cleared maybe like at least a foot where I was like digging the hole. And then I used the long grass and tied it and made baskets out of it.
Oh,
and that formed my frost protection.
Yeah.
And also my protection, it created shade for my trees, which I didn't have. So it created this beautiful little humid microclimate.
Wow.
And a lot of people, again, said, Alex, you can't, you know, you're crazy. It's grass is the enemy of the trees. But I didn't have the big clumps like right next to the tree. It was, you know, cleared a bit. But I also observed, you know, little silky oaks, sandpaper figs, eucalypts all popping up in the paddock. And I'm like, those can compete with the grass because they're natural pioneers. So I started trying to mimic that. And I was like, all right, those bush lemons, those guavas that I'm collecting on the side of the road, they were growing in that grass that was 2 meters tall. I'm like, great, they can compete with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I used that without that grass. There was a couple of rows. I got caught out. We got an unexpected heat wave and pretty much everything kind of pretty much died. That wasn't protected with the grass. So because we didn't have the budget for stakes and baskets and all of that kind of stuff, because I was propagating the trees for free. If you have to buy stakes for 5,000 trees and tree guards and all that, I was like, forget it. So I was just like, okay, well, and the little knots that kind of marked where the trees were. And the rows came about because we were trying to find those young trees along the driveway with brush cutters, which always ends in tears, as you could imagine, because you think you plant a tree and think, I'll know where that is. And then a few weeks go by and you can't find anything. So it just made it so much easier for maintenance.
So cool. I really love that. And so did you keep, like, now they've obviously become more established, did you keep the grass there, or what have you now planted around the trees and things?
So there is hope.
Please tell me there's hope.
you know when you have that idea in theory and you're like, so my theory was Soteria grass shouldn't really like shade. My goal was to shade it out, but I was like, I really don't know if this is going to work. So because we planted really fast growing acacias, that started to create basically huge amounts of shade. And what we've observed is where there's thick shade, the Soteria is no more. So it's this beautiful like dichondra ground cover. I'm just seeing if I can even see some. So it even looks, sorry, I'm just like kneeling over here. It's like this little kind of,
oh, yeah.
similar to that. And so instead of that thick clumping grass. It's like really the species has changed. Like I don't know my grasses so well because I was so overwhelmed just trying to learn all the tree species. My brain was full, but it's like a really thin wispy grass now. And now that I've got that shelter for the trees, so we maintain the rows with like a really, it's called a razorback mower. So it's a really low center of gravity because it's fairly steep. Like the most dangerous way of mowing is on contour because you've got the biggest risk of rolling. Yeah. So it's really low center of gravity. So that's what we've still got to be careful though. So we use that to maintain the main rows. And now what we're doing, now that we've got some canopy against, frost and the really hot days, is now we're starting to thin out the grass with just like a brush cutter. So it takes a few years. Like it's been probably just over 3.5, coming up to 4 years when I planted like my first little food forest plot. But yeah, we're noticing that thankfully it's getting shaded out. So it'll become like a forest floor. So we're transitioning from that like bacterial system, which is like grass and livestock, to more that fungal network with like a forest.
Yeah. We found in some parts of the block it has like it's a different kind of grass, but it's all along the front, which is exactly what you said. It's all where the sun is. And one side's irrigated through our septic that gets reticulated through there, and it must love being wet because it's like literally along the irrigation lines is where it's thriving.
It's like a blue-green. It's like thick, so thick. Yeah, it loves it.
And and the other side's like a food hedge, and so some stuff survived the grass, but there's some things that it just killed off. Like a lot of the salt bush we planted wasn't very happy, so I've dug it out and cut it right back, hoping that I can save it and replant it. But we've grown lots of acacias, lots of natives all along there as well, and starting to slowly underplant it. There's about 6 Hardenbergias that have just popped up all on their own, and that's now creating a really cool ground cover. So
that's my favorite kind of gardening.
I'm hoping we can outcompete it in most places that we don't really want it. Like I'm happy for it to be at the back of the block and everything, but man, in our food production area where we've got, we're trying to get asparagus in there and some rhubarb and perennial stuff as like our bottom layers underneath the trees we're planting. And it's winning the battle at the moment. So I'm glad I've got the conversation with you today to guide me and know that I've got hope still. So can you go into what agroforestry is a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So instead of it's basically combining trees, basically putting trees in your farming systems, if that makes sense. So instead of just having so if you think about regular crops, it's almost like a two-dimensional system. So agroforestry, just incorporating trees, which takes advantage of that kind of three-dimensional space. And what I've noticed too, just helping with the kind of microclimate. So there's different forms of agroforestry. You can incorporate there's things like silver pasture, so you can incorporate kind of cattle grazing. And obviously it all comes down to your, species selection and your spacing. So if you're wanting to run cattle, you'd plant your tree rows really wide apart so that the sun can get in. And actually then you'll have, kind of feed and grass for the cows. For me, it was a system I wanted to have basically a multi-species system so that if it's really dry, we've got things that will do really well. If it's really, wet and humid, there are other things that will thrive. So, just having that kind of multi-species to build in that resilience so that we know there's going to be a drought at some stage. We know there's going to be fires, there's going to be floods. It's just a case of when. So it's just kind of anticipating that. To have it's like a more self-sustaining system as well.
And so does it have overlaps with Syntropic where, you have these layers as well?
Yeah, so Syntropics is really, really densely planted. So Syntropics form is basically got more of a formula to it, if you like. A lot of the Syntropic systems do incorporate maybe annual vegetable production as like the early kind of pioneers of the system. I didn't do that just because of my context, not because it was right or wrong or anything, just because of that grass. So I was like, there is no way.
Yeah.
I did try it as an experiment. I put sunflowers and I put, rows of sunflowers, rows of tomatoes and other different crops just to see if they could kind of compete with, well, first of all, deal with the heavy clay and the grass, and it was a resounding no. So you can incorporate vegetables, but typically Syntropics is very, very tightly packed rows.
Right.
So you're going to have your kind of your understory, and then you've got kind of your so they're the shade loving things, and then more of a herbaceous layer, and then small, medium, tall, up to emergent. So if you think of a forest, they're like the trees that you'll see way up the top of the canopy that need some more light.
Yeah.
So with agroforestry, you could have systems where the trees are fairly widely spaced apart, like a timber plantation where you'll have cattle grazing through the timber plantations. So that's still kind of a form of agroforestry, but it's definitely not syntropics. So syntropics can be a form of agroforestry, whereas agroforestry is not always syntropics.
Sure. Yeah, I saw an article, I think it was on Gardening Australia. They did a piece on the macadamia farms up in the Northern Rivers and how they've been like alley cropping down the middle. Is that also kind of part of agroforestry, like just increasing biodiversity and those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
And it's good because the vast majority of our macadamia farms are all obviously monocultures, and heavily sprayed. So it's definitely, I think, it's definitely great introducing those other species to increase the diversity.
So since you started on this path, have you revisited vegetables now? Are you trying to regain that self-sufficiency a little bit with your food?
Yeah, so I always had, the permaculture principle of kind of start at your back door. So I've always had basically my pots at the back door. So if it's raining or I just need something green to throw into dinner. So I've always got pots at the back door with an array of herbs and veggies and things. And then I've got a lot of perennials. So I didn't abandon the vegetables, but I focused on, have you come across the tromboncino zucchini?
Yes, they look very cool. I haven't grown them myself yet.
Okay, well, coming from Victoria, I thought I'll just start with zucchinis because they're like a no-brainer. They're the easiest things to grow.
Yeah.
The flooding rains came, they all rotted. It was an epic failure. I was like, oh no, I can't even grow zucchinis. This one, so this tromboncino zucchini, I think I planted it once and it just kind of grows like a pumpkin. It reappears. It survives from -4 degrees Celsius to 44 degrees Celsius and just keeps producing these curvy zucchini. And then if you let them get really big, it's like a butternut pumpkin.
Cool. So can you eat it at all the different, so you can eat it small and it will taste more like a zucchini as well? Or because I've only ever seen
you can have little
ones that people
baby
grow.
ones, or you can let them grow really big and then you can you can roast them. So like that's been a staple crop. I have huge amounts of parsley that just self-sow. I have all my cherry tomatoes that self-sow. I've just planted a heap of Asian greens, but I've noticed in the beds, because I let things go to seed, I've got mustard greens, coriander, so many things that are just self-sowing. So that's kind of now my idea of a veggie patch. Like I will get some different seedlings in that maybe I really want to eat that year. But a lot of the things I have, like longevity spinach, Okinawa spinach, I'm probably surrounded by things here that I could probably show you. But so all of those things that, they'll just keep growing, whether I tend to them or not, whether I get to water them or not. And things like sweet potato, you can eat the leaves as well as the tubers. So I think that's been definitely a big focus where, they can survive without constant attention.
And so how much of your food needs are currently coming from your patch or your place?
So I eat meat, so I get basically meat from the local butchers, and then pretty much all my vegetables just come from the garden.
Amazing.
And pretty much, especially now that I'm at Dailies, like I'm so blessed because most days you come into work, there'll be a jackfruit or a papaya or custard apples, Rolinias. You get to try pretty much everything. And so, yeah, if I don't have things at home, like at the moment we're really I'm living off plantains as a staple. Instead of, I have potatoes coming up by themselves, but plantains are like just a great thing to, you can cook them like a potato when they're green, or I kind of bake them just with a bit of olive oil in the oven, and they kind of like caramelize, and they're sweet and they're beautiful. So I've started cooking with a lot of like my green bananas and things. But at the moment we've got, I'd say plantains, bananas, a lot of the citrus is coming on. And I'm trying to think, we've even got another flush of grummy charmer and things like that. So most of the time I pretty much, for me personally, like sometimes my partner will want, have a craving for, like, I just feel like broccoli and it's maybe, not quite in season or something. But I don't even like to, eat things from the supermarket. I just like to eat things that I've nurtured and that I know where it comes from. So especially when I'm having incorporating greens, I just go with a bowl, and I'll just there's a lot of weeds that I'll eat as well, that just kind of pop up by themselves. So I'll get a bowl, and it's just a mixed, basically leafy greens, herbs, different weeds and things that come up naturally, and that'll be kind of my addition to a meal, if you like.
We've lost that art, I think, in Australia of eating seasonally, and probably not Australia, it's a lot of the world. But when I think of Europe, eating weeds isn't that frowned upon, and they have this culture of, like collecting water and using all of the, bitter greens and things that you're finding and foraging. And I love that it's coming back more in Australia and people becoming more aware of it, because it's a bit of a lost art, I think.
Yeah, if it's not looking perfect and pretty and we've got a label telling us what it is, we get a bit,
and how to use it exactly.
So there's a lot. It's definitely been, really awesome learning journey the last 4 years of just going, like, I never knew you could eat sweet potato leaves, for example. Like, I just didn't know that. And it was really great. I think it was just yesterday, we were actually doing up mushroom. I think it was shiitake mushroom logs. I could have the type of mushroom wrong. I can't remember, but getting the inoculated little dowels and banging them into logs. So we're doing that at dailies now. So we'll have access to mushrooms as well. So that's really, and now that I have kind of the beginnings of a forest, I'll kind of do some experimentation with that as well. That's probably the only thing that I do buy is probably mushrooms if I'm craving mushrooms every now and then.
That is so amazing. It's so inspiring. I actually started watching some of your videos, but I need a day where maybe I'm sick to just sit there and binge watch all of them.
Well, I need to make a bit too busy, and I haven't had a focus on making more. So it's probably time for a much needed update as well of what's happening on our property. Yeah.
And so you're working at dailies. What a cool opportunity. I really want to come and see it in real life.
Yeah, you want to come and see it in real life?
Yeah.
No, it's amazing. And I think too, they've definitely got the largest range of exotic fruit trees in Australia. And I'm pretty sure, I did ask ChatGPT, I'm pretty sure it's in the Southern Hemisphere.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, so it's just the learning is every day I turn up to work, I'm learning something new. And that's what's just fascinating. Like, you're learning about just all weird and wonderful species that just aren't mainstream in our supermarkets. But also other species that have all sorts of different uses, whether it's medicinal or timber and so forth. So there's thousands of species. There's a lot of homework for me.
I can imagine your brain must be exploding, but
in a good way.
In a good way, for sure. I love their website because we're now in the subtropics, whereas before we had a different climate, kind of similar to you. We were in Newcastle.
Yeah, we were in Nelson Bay.
Oh, I grew up there.
There you go. We're at Fingal Bay.
But because it was a bit of a different climate and I wasn't gardening so much, and also we lived at my mum's place for a while at Scone, which was where most of my gardening was, but we had frosts and it was quite different. I love on the Daily's website that I can look up the varieties. So like we're choosing our apples, for instance, and picking apples that grow better in the subtropics with the right frost requirements and the cold, amount of cold they need, and then also what they pollinate with, so that I can make sure I've got other things that are going to pollinate it. And I've got like a whole spreadsheet because I can't keep track of it in my head of like what I need and what will grow well. And I bought a Santa Rose plum, so it's like what other plums are going to be at the same time, and trying to figure it all out, and just varieties of things that I'm not familiar with. And I did my PDC at Limestone Permaculture, so even from
fantastic
his kind of climate to up here, and some of the recommendations he had are obviously going to be very different to what I need to be buying and growing in this area. And still kind of struggling with that subtropic humidity and figuring out, what things like, tomatoes are pretty fine here, but the zucchini definitely, like we got 3 zucchini, and normally you're like force feeding people zucchini and hiding it in things. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to grow zucchini again, but the tromboncino is a good tip, so I'll have to do that next year. Do you grow it all year round, or it's still that summer kind of crop?
I grow like I think a lot of it's not very intentional. I just have a lot of stuff growing and it just pops up when it wants to. So I just kind of go, oh, well, what's in the garden today? And then if I've got a space somewhere, I'll put in some seedlings or so it's, but it pretty much like it survives all year. Like I haven't replanted it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I'm still trying to break my type A habits of like wanting everything in when it's meant to be in. And like I've got lots of polyculture. Like we'll have one bed with all different kinds of things in it, but I'm still like planting each season, and I'm not that great at plant ID yet when they're tiny. And so I'm like, is it a weed? Can I leave it? Is that dill? No, it's not. I don't know what it is. Trying to figure it all out still. So yeah, I'm getting there slowly, kind of breaking my old habits of planting only one thing and planting in little neat rows. But
I'll still plant in rows, and then it'll kind of go to seed and self-sow. Like I've got all mustard greens coming up in the pathways and nasturtiums. I'm like, oh, well, it's edible. I'll leave it there. A good tip with the weeds, because this really did my head in as well, like trying to identify. So if you've got the same weed in the same looking thing in every bed, it's usually a weed. Do you know what I mean? Like same with your seed raising trays. If you notice that consistent across all of them, it's a good way of going, oh, that must be a weed. And then if you've kind of noticed, I can see that this, like that's more difficult if it self-sows and it's like lettuce and it's blown everywhere. But so that's how I kind of like was trying to work it out. Like, oh, that's popped up in literally my whole nursery. That must be a weed.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like that. And so what kind of other goals do you have with your property now? You guys have been there for a little while. Will you integrate animals into the system? And
so that's definitely I discovered like you definitely got to have electric fencing or something. We were adjusting cows and this gorgeous little calf decided she wanted to fit under the electric fence, which she could, and decided to eat all the grafts off my avocados. So it's like, so it's kind of like, like I want to ultimately incorporate, animals. It's just that timing thing and making sure they're excluded, or, you've got maybe intensively grazed like laneways or something set up. So, we're getting to a point now where the trees are definitely mature enough to be able to handle animals. So we haven't quite decided yet exactly which animals. We've just been focusing more of, the trees are the priority of getting the microclimate more favorable and decompacting the soil. So we have been looking at a few different options, and I'd say we're still open at this stage.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, because it's also just like 10 acres, as in like you can't have, maybe 3 head of cattle or something, or, like it just depends. It's all fine now. You could have, a fair few because it's so green, but it's that, we have heaps of fodder now as well. So, we have all sorts of fodder for goats, for cows, even, I've purposely planted fodder for cows and horses on the boundaries.
Yeah.
So when we've got horses next door, I'll just be able to bend down a tree branch. They especially love the mulberries. They're really high in protein, so that's been good too.
Cool.
Just seeing which trees they actually like to eat.
Yeah. And I think it's a funny thing with animals too, because you kind of have to be there or have almost like an on-farm job, or be more present on the property. And I'm always conscious of like, what's that threshold of how much I need to be at home if we start getting more animals and integrating animals too, because I haven't had them before, and so I know I could rehome them if it didn't work out, but just figuring out what's doable in our context.
But I think that's such a great line of thought as well, Alysse, because like for us, it was like we want everything, but once you get the chickens and the annual, I would say like annual crops and animals, they need daily attention. And we had a dear old 18-year-old cat who was amazing. He used to be my little protector and warn me of brown snakes. He would follow me when I was planting trees and hiss and get between me if there was a snake. And he also kept the rat and mice population down in my polytunnels. So he was amazing, but very sadly, the moment he died, we'd had our chickens for 4 years and they all got taken by a fox.
Wow.
So it's like he, male cat. So we think maybe, he could have kept the foxes away, just marking his territory or whatever. So we don't have any animals at the moment. That's why we're like, okay, maybe it would be nice to go on a holiday, the two of us like together, instead of having to always have, someone at home. You can get house sitters, and don't get me wrong, there's so many, options, but we're just like, okay, let's just focus on, as you said, getting the property finished, filling in any gaps. And the other thing I'd love to do as well is, just start doing, I've done just more kind of casual tours of the property and things like that, but it would be really nice to, have some little tours and
epic,
like
I'll get a bus with all our permies from here and we'll come up. It can be your first trial run.
Fantastic.
That'd be so cool.
And just do things more with schools as well. Like I know that my aunt, she used to work at the museum when I was little, and she would fill up her car and bring it to the school with all amazing like fossils and all different artifacts, and it was all to do with like the living world. But that really, a lot of people I've spoken to, there's a lady here who's studying regenerative agriculture, and she said a lot of people who are doing the course were also, there was that moment, in childhood that really inspired them to want to do that when they grew up. So she said, like that had a profound impact on her, definitely had a profound impact on me with that connection with the natural world. If we could start doing things with school, well, because I love teaching as well. Like I also was, tutoring maths and homeschooling and things like that. So to continue that teaching and literally planting that little seed,
that would be amazing.
Possible.
But I think the more we can kind of spread awareness and show different ways of doing things in different contexts, people can see themselves in that and go, oh, I could implement this, or I could do this kind of part of what they're doing, and it just is really inspiring. And it I think it's great if we can share more and more of that.
And it might be just one thing, you go, oh, I never thought of that, and it's like, and I say there's not one right way or one wrong way. It, like you said, it all depends on your context, totally. Like you might, like me at the moment, I just want to deal with kind of perennials, but there's people who have access to water, for example, and have magnificent annual gardens, and that in itself is so inspiring. So it just totally depends on what works for you, kind of thing.
And before we jumped on the call, you kind of told me that you had a really cool offering that people might be interested in.
Oh, yeah. So because I'm super, super passionate about plants, as you can probably tell, and sometimes like we're talking about different climates and what to plant, I wanted to offer people like a 30-minute free consult. So we can put a link below or something like that.
So generous of you.
But I just thought that, like, I know that I was thinking about like what I really struggled with when we first moved here. It was definitely, I had no idea kind of what to plant, how to do it, where to start. And I really like was looking for that guidance. So yeah, if that's helpful to people, then yeah, I'm more than happy to offer a half-hour free consult just to, see where you're at, what you're trying to achieve, and if there's
that's
anything.
amazing. I was thinking maybe if you'd be open to it, we could do ours and record it so people could see what it was all about even.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah,
cool.
That sounds amazing.
So what's one piece of advice that you'd give people that are kind of just starting out on this kind of journey that you've gone on?
I spoke to a lot of people about what their number one regret was when they started, and it all came back to not getting their trees in sooner. Annual veggies, as you know, you can get them in an afternoon. You've got food literally in a few weeks. Trees take a little bit longer. And a lot of people I spoke to said if we had have planted our fruit trees when we first moved here, we'd already be harvesting them by now. So I feel like I've wasted like 3 years, but sometimes too, it's, we do the opposite. We plant like I did. I didn't understand this climate. So I planted things that didn't necessarily work, but you also learn by doing.
Totally.
But yeah, like definitely, if you have that dream of, you want to be, even if it's just having your own fresh limes or something that's, it's like spray free in your backyard where you've got a constant supply. Just thinking about what you would love to be eating, and that obviously does, well in your climate, and kind of get that in sooner rather than later, because those years do go by quite quickly. So that would be like, my biggest piece of advice. And start with stuff that's hardy. Because then you build on success. You don't build on like I planted things like soursop and all these like tropical things, and we get frost. Like of course they died, but if you start with the stuff like really like tough as nails stuff that's designed to thrive, whether it's drought or humid summers, then I would say that's the way to go. And I can, if people are interested in having a chat, I can definitely advise on maybe some things that might be a good spot to start.
That would be amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm so keen to chat with you and do a little one-on-one consult and see how you think my place is going, but what else I should be planting, because I'm still such a newbie up here in this climate. So it'd be awesome to talk to you.
Would absolutely love that. Yeah.
Cool. And I'll put all your information in the show notes, your webpage. We'll put a link for the consults in there and your YouTube and all that kind of stuff, so people can get in contact with you if they want to chat more.
Fantastic. And it's good timing because I think a storm's coming through. It's getting very windy.
I can hear it on the dome. That's funny. Amazing. Well, thank you again.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Alysse.
Bye.
Bye.